Welcome back to episode 164 of the Hockey Cards Gongshow podcast. My name is Josh. I'm here with Troy. What's going on, Troy? This is like a weird space-time continuum because this is, of course, our Monday show for February 26th, but we're actually recording our preamble a few days before because we got a whole bunch of things going on. You're in the midst of the Minnesota State High School Girls Hockey Tournament where by the time people are listening, it's over. You
Yeah.
think you won, Troy?
I hope we won. We better come out and play the next two games. We won our first game against Maple Grove. I kind of mentioned that they were going to be the toughest unseeded team. We knew it was going to be a dogfight. It was. Lots of video reviews. Our first goal was reviewed. It was deemed a good goal. They wanted to make sure our girl didn't kick it in. And then Maple Grove they didn't call it a goal, but they reviewed it to make sure it wasn't a goal, and that wasn't a goal. And then we scored our third goal, and that got reviewed and taken away for offsides, which was probably the right call. We didn't have a really good angle, but just seeing how wide open our girl was and how kind of ahead of the play she was, we figured it was offsides. But yeah, we won. It was a dogfight. We knew it'd be a pretty tough game, but it was good to get the first one. So now we got two more, hopefully two. Well, we got two more no matter what. Hopefully we are in the championship and can win that.
So here on Monday in the future, you're either basking in your glory or you're
sad.
crying in your soup, as my mom would like to say.
Oh, is that like a new dollars to donuts phrase?
Well, actually, she explained it to me. Is that it's like it's a very old saying or reference again, where to make you have salt in your tears, and so if you cry in your soup, it makes your soup taste better.
Okay.
There you go, Troy. You live and learn. Now, and continuing with their weird space-time continuum, by the time the show comes out, I'll be in Mexico, and I'm guessing either I'll have been eaten by a shark at this point or be somewhere in a Mexican jail. What's your prediction?
I'm hoping neither. I'm hoping you're lounging, relaxing, enjoying your time away. Good family vacation. I think you have a bunch of people going. It's good. You should have fun.
Well, that's how we roll, Troy. It's always a bunch of people, but it is a great time. I do want to make a quick mention to our last show where we talked about 2023-24 wax prices, try to enter in the big picture equation to that. I don't think we've ever gotten more feedback on a show that we've done.
Tons of comments.
Oh my gosh.
YouTube, on Discord, on Instagram messages, tons of stuff.
Facebook. Yeah, it was just crazy. Very, very appreciative. We got a lot of great feedback, a lot of great perspective. None of these issues are cut and dry or super easy. So that's why I really appreciate kind of getting people's thoughts and being able to reflect a little bit and maybe change my own opinion on some stuff. And it's not like everyone's feedback was the same, but what I did get the sense of in seeing all the comments is that there's a lot of concern over this and maybe what the future will bring. And so, we'll just have to keep following it and see what happens, of course. Well, we got an awesome show for you today. One I'm very, very excited for everyone to be able to listen to or watch. But before we get started, Troy, just a quick reminder that the Hockey Cards Gongshow podcast is a Patreon podcast, which means we rely on support of listeners and watchers like yourself. Help us cover our show expenses, produce more and hopefully better hockey card content, and fund initiatives, even in a small way, to grow the hockey hobby. Right now, you can be one of our out of 199 supporters through Patreon. Be one of the first 199 supporters of our show. It's $5 a month. You get access to our Gong Show Discord, chat with us on the regular there. Very easy to do. You can go to our website, hockeycardsgongshow.com, and click on the Become a Patron link at the top of the page, or go to the Patreon website directly, patreon.com, and search for Hockey Cards Gong Show. There's a link in the show description if you're listening to us on a podcast app, or if you're watching on YouTube, there's a link there too. And then finally, there's a link in our Instagram and TikTok profiles. Not really much of a game plan. We're kind of just winging our intro here into our conversation with Gene, but you did want to make a note, I think, about the highly anticipated, I predict it does so well that I just move into the producer role and you go solo going. But tell us, Troy, about what you have planned for Thursday's.
I have no clue what I got planned, but I'll say this. So I know everyone's waited with bated breath on our almost greatest player to wear each number episode or segment. But however, no almost greatest player to wear number 64 today or on today's show. I'm going to double up on the Gong Show Troy Solo Experience show. I'll have number 64 and number 65. I'll probably shorten them up a little bit, but I know everyone's waiting for that. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going to go on during the Solo Experience. If it's going to be a train wreck, everyone unsubscribes, and Josh comes back sad.
Oh, stop.
I take over, and it's my show now. We'll see.
Well, I just hope that you're not like so depressed because you've lost in the state tournament. So that's the big. You got to win so that you're excited and happy.
I'll just be going over game film and complaining to everyone. I'm like, watch this. See how we didn't cover this girl in front. Oh.
The railroad.
Royal Road.
All right, we're gonna get into Gene in just a second. I do want to give one more because it is a little bit of a weird kind of setup to our show today. Just a quick shout out to our sponsors. We're really, really lucky to be supported by great companies like PWCC, Slab Sharks, and My Card Post that we firmly believe in, and they're great people, and we're very proud to be able to help them communicate what they have going on and some of the offers that they have to the hockey hobby. And we have an audience, of course. We do work hard to promote them, but I can tell you for each one of those companies, part of why they support us is that they want to support the hobby. They want to make sure that there is content for people to listen to in the hockey. And there hasn't been a lot of, and that was kind of one of the opportunities that Troy and I identified when we started this little show. And that's a big part of what they do. So again, I just want to give them a little bit of a shout out and thank them for trying to make the hobby better and trying to support content providers like ourselves. So again, big thanks. Please check out Slab Sharks, PWCC, and My Card Post. Well, Troy, we were very, very lucky to have the opportunity to chat with G. McLoud from Upper Deck, who now leads design for the company, but her legacy in sports cards that everyone will hear goes way, way back to the late 80s, early 90s with Fleer. And if you think of sports cards as art, which I think a lot of people do, she might be the Picasso of, or something like that, right? I'm trying to think of other famous artists that I know. The bottom line is she has designed some of the most iconic cards in all the hobbies. So if you like PMGs or Essential Credentials or Jambalayas, the whole Skybox Metal Universe is Jean McLeod.
Yeah.
And so we were lucky enough to have a conversation with her. It's the first, and I was really excited to talk to a designer and get a little bit of insight as to, how that role works and kind of what cog in the machine or as far as the whole process to produce sports cards. And so she was very generous with her time, and we hope you enjoy our conversation with Jean. Well, we are really excited and pleased to be joined today by Jean McLoud from Upper Deck. Another person at Upper Deck we get to talk to, and this is a very, very exciting conversation for me. Welcome, Jean, to our podcast. Great to have you. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Yep.
So I already forgot, and I know because it's how my brain works, Jean. So your role is senior something. You design the hockey cards at Upper Deck. What is your official title again?
Senior Director of Design.
Okay. And I know you have a long, and we'll get into it a little bit, kind of storied history and designing trading cards for multiple companies, starting with Fleer. But how long have you been with Upper Deck full time now?
Only since August 1st. So
okay.
Months, yeah.
Relatively new there, but obviously not new to trading cards. And so I'll give because I did my homework, Gene, and I was very excited to talk to you today and wanted to learn about your contributions really to the hobby that we care a lot about. And so let me know if I have this correct, and you can kind of maybe fill in some of the blanks that so you and your husband are graphic artists and graphic designers and and had a company called Arena Design. And at some point you began working with Fleer, which like Pops and a lot of the other trading, the history of trading cards is so tied to candy and
Yeah,
confectionery companies. And I know
yeah.
that with Arena, you've done a lot of packaging work in
Hmm.
and so there's obviously a fit and a connection
Right.
there. And so I assume that when you get hired at Fleer and you're kind of more thinking candy, and then at some point, does somebody come to you and said, "Hey, do you want to like design a baseball card or something like that?" And I'm just
Um,
wondering, like what your initial kind of reaction to that was.
well, when I started at Fleer, yes, I did start on their candy side. I
Okay.
designed their Razzles package, which was fun because that was something I had as I was growing up. Um, but they always had the intent of me working on cards
Okay.
because my background was that I designed high roller invitations for casinos in Atlantic
Oh yeah.
City.
Okay.
So a lot of that stuff they thought I could bring to the trading card industry. So I printed on a lot of different substrates, a lot of foils, embossing, die cutting, all that kind of fun stuff that we wound up bringing into cards. I had a history of that in my work. So I think they were thinking, oh, this is kind of interesting. I didn't have any sports in my background, but I think they could see that what I could bring
Yeah,
to
a lot translates from designing some of those like those high roller promotional probably
yeah,
cards into training cards, and we'll get into the whole printing technology versus creativity and how
yeah.
that's a big consideration and probably constraint at sometimes to your process in
Hmm.
in a minute. So do you remember the first trading card or sports card set that you worked on?
I do, but I don't. I don't normally like to talk about it. I will bring it up, but
Okay.
it was only because there were so many things that went wrong. It was like there we started with a new company to scan all of our scans, and they were horrible. And
Yeah.
then we worked with a new pre-press company, and just everything that could go wrong went wrong. It was also a pretty big leap for them. It was a football. I think it's 92 Fleer football. It
Okay.
has like a green border,
Yeah, yeah.
and I stripped out the backgrounds of all the players and put like a screen of a vignette of color behind them, which was like very different. I was shocked that they went for it, and I think it could have turned out nice, except all these other issues came up at the same time. So
Well, I think like most
nonetheless, was
things
my
in
first step.
but I assume though, like most things in life, that was very informative and
Yeah.
actually paid dividends for you down the road, and
Yes, for
probably
sure.
not the introduction you wanted, and it's
Right.
never best laid plans, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm sure that was, like I said, pretty instrumental. And so then you worked at Fleer through the was it early '90s that you started designing cards for them, or was it even the
I
late '80s?
started in 1990, but by
Okay.
that time, when when you're working on cards, you're working a little bit ahead. So I started in
Yeah.
90, didn't start working on cards till probably 91. So I was probably working on 92. That would have been the first sets that I would have worked on. And I worked through 2000. So probably the 2001, 2002 sets, I also had a hand in. So if that
I know that
makes
you
sense.
worked on, like, baseball, like, all sports for Fleer. Did you do any of the hockey sets in the '90s too?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah. I probably did most of the hockey sets in the 90s because we were a very small department. And at that time, oh boy, we didn't have Skybox yet. So
Yeah.
that kind of doubled our productivity. So we then started growing as a department. But before then, yeah, I probably worked on most of the hockey sets that we did.
One of the things I've always been really curious about when it just kind of looking back at the industry and sort of how the cards themselves and the sets have evolved? And you would be a great person to answer this. And this is believe me, this is a compliment. But starting in the mid 90s, in the most beautiful way, sets started to get pretty weird
Yeah.
and big departures and all these crazy new technologies and
Yeah.
and not just sort of the traditional sort of right different color border, maybe different background, like it was very little incremental design changes, it seemed like from year to year, and
Yeah.
then sort of went off the rails in a beautiful way. So what happened in the environment that created that freedom for you guys to
It's funny. I think about that a lot because you're right. Like even when I first started, I was trying to make some big changes, but you had a lot of traditional collectors who didn't like some of the stuff I was doing. So we had brands that we would try to keep very traditional. And then there were certain brands that they were like, yeah, do whatever, have fun with it. So I also feel like a lot of it had to do with, believe it or not, designers getting into computers. So like before that, we were very constrained by what we could do. But once you started really working on computers, you had fonts that we never had access to before. We could manipulate fonts. And so I think we started to just really have fun with the technology
Mhm.
and probably went a little overboard with some of the things that we could do and wanted to just put it into our jobs. But and then after a while, we probably tamed it back. But I think really I do think that technology was a big part of why we started doing some much more fun stuff.
I want to skip ahead real quick to today, and then we'll go back into the mid to late 90s because it's one of my favorite periods in I guess, the industry as far as how the sets were designed and all the innovation I think that we
Yeah.
saw. How important is it though? Like, because you look at like the hockey landscape today, we have like an SP Authentic or the Cup, which are very traditional, right? They have like they're very you have to be on brand, and
Yes.
it's kind of like I was thinking of those as you were talking about maybe the sets in the 80s and 90s and how they're very traditionalist, and then you have different Upper Deck seems to have different sets, like a Synergy or maybe Trilogy or just not necessarily that's important to like name names because that but that's the spirit of my question is it almost seems like Upper Deck or any other trading card company needs to have sets that there's no guardrails that
Yeah.
allow you to experiment, so because that's how you discover new things, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when Fleer purchased Skybox, I think that's when for me things really opened up because we now had two sets of brands and we had meetings about how do we have each have their own look, have their own feel, have a reason for being for each of the sets that we would put out so that they would appeal to different people or maybe the same person but that had two different likes. So once we did that, we decided Skybox was going to be kind of the crazy sets, the sets that we could do new technologies and try things out as far as design goes, as far as printing technologies go. So like EX and metal and all that stuff that would go under the Skybox brand. And then we had the traditional brands. So we still do that at Upper Deck. I think that's great. I do feel like some of them are much more experimental.
Yeah.
And I think that's good. You don't know, like collectors know what they like today, but I'm always looking for what they'll like tomorrow. So they're only going to know that once we try something and we put it out there and see how they feel about it. And so those brands allow us to do that, which is fun. Those are the brands I love to work on. Yeah.
Oh, I because they give the most creative freedom, I assume. But okay, let's go back really quick
Yep.
to late 90s. So 97, 98 Metal Universe is, one of the more iconic sets in all the hobby. And
Hmm.
it seems like the two, before we get into maybe some of the cards that you had a hand in creating out of that. It's, because a lot of the big hockey inserts today have their roots to that time period in those couple of years.
Hmm.
But it seems like though that it was the basketball. Was there something particular about basketball that, or was it just more popular at the time, or why? Like you look at a lot of
Yeah.
the big hockey inserts today, and it's like you can almost like draw a line back to 96, 97, 98 basketball, and I'm just curious what the connection is there, if you know of that.
I mean, I think it was a number of factors. One was that we had a really good relationship with the NBA at the time. And any sets that I had some really great ideas for, like I thought, oh, this is going to be so much fun. They would say, that's more of a basketball
Oh,
like
really?
audience. So I would put everything into basketball because basically they would tell me like baseball's so traditional. They're not going to like that. Hockey is more traditional. They're not going to like that. But basketball, do whatever you want. So, I mean, I think some of that, but also, I mean, look at the players that were in basketball back then. It was
Yeah,
just
Michael
like
Jordan and
Jordan and Kobe and Iverson and like the list goes on and on. So I think it was like a perfect world of both of those things coming together.
how much of the muse is important when designing sports cards? So having those iconic characters, does that really factor in at all, or is it just a picture of a player and you're more focused on sort of the overall aesthetic of it? Is that a dumb question?
No, it's not. I mean, I would like to say that the player has more
Yeah,
input, but for me, it's more about making any player, whoever it is on the card, be the hero. So, we always wanted to elevate the player on the card, whoever it was going to be. And like on the metal cards, people are like, "Oh, I love that, the flames coming off of Jordan's ball." Well, it just so happened that that was his card, but I didn't pay more attention to one particular player's card than another player's card. Every card to me
sure.
was important.
Okay, we have to talk about Metal Universe and particularly the PMG, which
Yeah.
you created. So the thing that I think of is I'm a music fan too, and I love to like go and hear the stories of my favorite band or hear them interviewed and that origin story,
Yeah.
right? When you never, I assume you had no idea that
Mm.
these were gonna be, and so I'm just curious as like what can you tell us about, and I know when I met you actually, and Jeremy Lee introduced us at the National last year. I know there's kind of a story around it, and I'm hoping that you would maybe give us a glimpse into that sort of, because it's such a meaningful card to collectors, like how that came about and what was that origin story of the PMG.
Um, well, we had done metal baseball and probably hockey before we ever did the basketball set. And so they didn't have the PMGs in them. They had parallels, but they were not the green and the red PMGs. And so we were opening other card sets. We looked at competitor product, we looked at our own product, and we thought this could really use something. So when they named it PMGs or precious metal gems, automatically I thought of, okay, gems. My favorite gem is an emerald. It's my birthstone. It's my engagement ring. I don't know if you see.
Yeah.
So I was like, I want to do an emerald green. And so I went to a foil company. They created that foil for us. It was
Wow.
specially created because they had green and red foils, but this had like a holographic quality to it. And so we wanted that like rich
Yeah.
holographic foil. And so I thought an emerald, of course, a ruby kind of goes great with emerald. So we had them create those two foils for us. And the strange thing is we did that 1 year. I mean, it was I always
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of did stuff one and done.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I should have had a history of things and kept some of that stuff. But I was always like, oh, what can we do next? What could we do next? What would be the next fun thing to do? So I love those cards. I like the base cards just as much because the illustrations were so intensive to get done. We were owned by Marvel at that point. I had the Marvel illustrators do all the backgrounds, and that took a lot of work to get that part done. So I love the base cards, but I understand the PMGs being so rare that, of course, that's what people would be attracted to. And I wanted you to open the pack and immediately see a color and be like, oh, this is, something special, something different than the base card. So that was kind of my thinking, was something extremely different.
Okay, to bring it back to like my musician analogy, sometimes I'll listen to interviews with like famous artists or singers or songwriters, and they'll say, well, I wrote 15 songs and the huge hit, they're like, I didn't know that this is the one people
Yeah.
were gonna love. Yeah, I'm curious if that's similar to you. Like when you design a card like a PMG, do you know like right away it's like, oh, I know this is gonna resonate with people, or are you just a surprise sometimes that the ones that tend to really be received very well, which are the ones that maybe fall a little flatter?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's certain cards that I love that people tell me they love too. So I'm happy about that. But there are a lot of cards that, sometimes I love a card because of the design, not necessarily the player or the rarity of it, and so all those things, all those factors come into play, whereas I'm looking at it strictly at design.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am shocked at the PMGs, how well they have done. But I'm glad it's in the metal set because that set was intense to get done, and I'm happy that people love it.
When was the first time that you saw one of the cards that you designed sell for a lot of money? Do you remember that?
Oh, geez, sell for a lot of money. Actually, the first hockey set that I ever heard that they were saying people love these cards. They're going for more, than what they expected, were the the original Padmen done in Ultra.
Yeah.
I actually have some of those here, like this set. So I remember them saying how popular those were. So I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like I had no idea. But as far as pricing goes, I'm not even sure because I was out of it for a while. And when I was out in the early 2000s, that's when all that stuff started to become more and more expensive.
Yeah.
So when SB Nation called me and said, we want to do a thing on trading card design, and we came across your website because we have some cards on our website. And we went to interview. So I did a quick interview with them. And then after that, it started to explode. Like people would call me and ask questions. And then I started looking into the cards. And then I was like, what has happened in this time period that I was not paying attention? It was crazy how much value these cards had that I didn't even realize.
Yeah, I just think it must be weird to create, because there's so much, I think, reward in creativity and in creating, and then
Yeah,
it's just sort of at the end of the day, I think for any artist, it's like the process, right, is
for
really the
sure.
ultimate, and reflecting on that is the ultimate reward. But then
Yeah,
you go and you see somebody spent like $200,000 on a
I know.
design that I made. It's just got to
Yeah,
be mind blowing to you, I would think.
it is. Well, I mean, I would say the PMGs obviously were the first that I heard of that were going for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was shocked, but I'm glad because Earl and I really did pour all of our time into it, our effort. We loved doing it. We loved working on something that people held so dear and were going to hang on to, and it also had their heroes on it. Like the
Yeah.
players on it were obviously a big part of the card. So I'm just glad that people notice all these little things that we did, and people point things out that I'm like, I can't believe you noticed that. Like it's to me, it's great. I love it.
I read once like theories on like why sports cards are popular, valuable, and why people are so drawn to them. And the analogy that the publication or the writer or perspective that they gave was that sports cards are really a true representation of modern art pieces, where in general the population at large doesn't collect paintings or watercolors, or
Yeah.
maybe you can argue they should, or they should appreciate photography more. But do you kind of look at it that way? Do you see these as not just representations of players that you have enjoyed and loved, but really, kind of a modern art piece?
100%. Like Earl and I always looked at the 2.5 by 3.5 format as a little canvas. As each one, like every time you open a page and you start to design, you have to put in 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, and a white page comes up, and it's just like having a white canvas in front of you. So that's the way we always looked at it. And it's limitless. Like, it's amazing what you can do with that tiny little format, how much you can get on there. And then to me, bringing in the printing technology, which is something that I have a passion for, that just adds to it to me. So
It's a whole different universe than where so much graphic design is purely digital today.
yeah.
And so you're almost unencumbered in some ways. And so I'm kind of curious, maybe we'll get into that right now. When it comes to technology, where does like what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it sort of the how do I want to use technology, or how do I want to create a design and then find the technology that makes that design work?
At Fleer versus at Upper Deck, it's completely the opposite. So when I was at Fleer, I would sometimes send out designs, sometimes design them, or I would sometimes design them. So I would get the designs in and I would say, oh, what would this card look good on? And then I would say, oh, I have this new stock that I think this would work great on, and we could die cut and we could emboss it. And I would look at the design and work the technology around that design. Now, when we get a set structure, it says it's all costed up front. We have to know what we can afford in a product.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we have a die cut, and this one's going to be on plastic, and this one's going to be on metal, and this one. So it's completely the opposite of what it used to be. So both ways obviously work.
Yeah.
But in different ways.
How much room do you think is left for innovation in trading card printing technologies? It's like, is there a whole ocean of possibilities you think that have yet to been, or are we getting to the point where it's like, what else can we do?
After I just did a card, which I can't wait to see what people think of. I can't talk about it. But it is very different than any card I've done before. So I feel like there'll always be something. Plus, just the combination. You can do things in a new way by combining things that you've already done in a new way. Mm-hmm. And they're always perfecting things. Actually, some things are harder to do now than they were 25 years ago, because think about back then, everything was printed. There was no digital world. A very small digital world. So now a lot of the specialty printers have gone away because we don't print all of that stuff anymore. So like having a lack of the artisans that do that has been a little bit shocking to me, getting back into it now and realizing there's limitations that I didn't have before. Whereas I thought, oh, wow, this is going to be great. Like, obviously everything has gotten better and better over the years, but that's not always the case.
One of the things that Troy and I have gotten kind of used to on our show as we talk about all the new sets that come out is a lot of times, like, Upper Deck, what you guys will do is you'll months in advance, you'll publish like a solicitation that has sort of the highlights of the set and then some photos. And very often, and it's very understandable as to why, is that you'll see the photos and then when the set does come out, you'll see that card in hand, and you'd be like, "Whoa, this is way better than
Yeah.
it was in the
Yeah.
original scans." And I just got to think that that happens to you a lot as as you're designing these on your computer. You have a technology in mind, and you probably almost don't even really understand, does the result meet what you had imagined, and until you can see the printing combined with sort of the art and the strategy behind that design.
Yeah. I mean, that's mostly because we're simulating the foil, like we're
Yeah.
simulating the technology, and it's really hard to simulate the print, especially with the techniques that we use. We use foil, I mean, etch dyes and all kinds of stuff that the light reflection is what is going to give it life. And so we're trying to simulate that, but I've been working at trying to get better representation of that, because I mean, when I did the ultra set, and that was a e-pack only, so a lot of
Yeah.
those cards,
Love
people,
that set, by the way.
oh, thank you. So people, like a lot of those cards, people were never even going to see. So I wanted to try to simulate that, but I hear people say that particularly about that set, like the cards look so much better in hand than
They
than what I saw. Yeah. So like the Padman that I was talking about, I do
Yeah.
have one of these Padman. I'm really happy with how this turned out. So, but then I see the simulation, I'm like,
Well,
it
even to like and it's not just, I think, your marketing efforts at Upper Deck. It's some cards just don't photograph real well.
yeah,
They
that's true.
like the a great example is the the platinum medallions, or all the medallions, the different parallels that you guys designed with that 2021 Flare Ultra set. Uh, they just, you either have to get in that right light to
Yeah.
get that sort of like that reflective rainbow sort of, I don't know what the term is for it. And a lot of times they just kind of look flat when
Yeah.
whether it's your pictures or people selling them on eBay or whatever it is. And but I kind of always have looked at that as kind of a great surprise, like when you like a card and you buy it, and then you go to the mailbox and it's there, and it's like, wow, this is like way better than the card I thought I was getting. So I
Well, I
tend to
was
really
at the
appreciate.
national, and I had the ultra team, this card.
Yeah,
And so I was showing a few people because I had some samples, and they were like, "Oh my god, I didn't like." I saw a picture of that, and I thought, "What is that?" That's the hardest card to get. And then when they saw this in hand, they were like, oh, "Okay, I'm going to go on eBay and try to get some of those." So
yeah.
I mean, some of it is nice to like be surprised you get it, and then sometimes I feel like people would not even order it if they didn't know how cool it was going to look in hand. But
Okay, so we're gonna go back to kind of our timeline here a little bit. So it's the mid '90s. You've one of the most, maybe the most iconic set of, other than like 52 tops of baseball, maybe, or something like that, is, the 97, 98 Metal Universe PMGs. It's kind of awesome that your engagement ring was
yeah,
the inspiration for the Emerald PMG. There's so many kind of just amazing cards though, and we're going to talk about EX 2001, which is coming back. That was announced in a little bit, but from that mid to late '90s era, do you have like a favorite set or a favorite card, just personally for you, that you just loved?
um, I mean, this is going to sound obvious, but to me, my favorite card that Earl and we worked together on, which was Jambalaya.
Yeah,
The reason I like that so much is that he designed it. He bought it in for a meeting. I saw the design, I loved it, and then I had this stock that I wanted to use, that lenticular kind of very dimensional stock. And I think combining those two things is what made that card um, so unique and different. And So that's one of my favorite cards, I would say, because we worked on that together. Geez, the first Flare set, I love that set, because that was the first set that they ever said to me, do whatever you want, but it's going to be like a super premium card. It's going to go for $5 a pack, which sounds crazy now to say that that was so expensive, but at the time it was crazy. And so Earl and I put a lot of time and effort into figuring out all the intricacies of that set. Should it be what stock it should be on? It was liquid laminated. We had foil front and back. We had multiple photos that kind of were very kind of dreamy feel to it.
Yeah.
All that stuff. And then the packaging. I think all of that lent to knowing that it was going to be a super premium brand. I mean, there's so many cards. It's hard to say. There were a lot
of children, right?
Yeah. I mean, EX I love because that's like a technology-driven set, and I just loved that technology. I just love the look of those cards. But
now the lenticular stock that you guys used for Jambalayas, because I'm a huge Jambalaya person. Okay. Well, so first I'm going to say is I never got it until, we're in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area, and we've got a card shop that's in the northern suburbs here that has really kind of very, very nice cases. Like they put jeweler's lights in them. And so when I walked in there and they had a jambalaya and they had those beautiful, bright, intense jeweler's lights that just lit up it was like lighting up a Christmas tree. Yeah. Right. Seeing that jambalaya, it's like, oh, I get it now. Was that a new technology though? Because I always think of like the lenticular, maybe I'm wrong here, as like the late 80s baseball cards where like guys swinging a bat and then he's not, like in motion kind of stuff. And it just seems like a huge leap from that to the substrate of a jambalaya.
Well, it's not a new technology in that it is lenticular. It's that this company produced a stock that really knew how to use that technology. So in the past, we did hot numbers, which had that was a lenticular. We did some where it flipped, some where it's dimensional. But a lot of those, those were all custom. This happened to be a stock that was ready. You could buy it ready-made, but they had different printing. Like they had different patterns, I guess, and we chose this kind of one that looked like a beehive because that had the most dimension. And so it wasn't a new technology. It was just a company that made this new stock that I think they really knew how to dimensionalize and use that technology.
Yeah, I just go back and I think and I was looking through your arena design website and some of your portfolio and just how important it is to push boundaries and we'll get into a little bit sort of the delicate balance between retros and tributes versus new stuff and how at least important I think that is. But you look at cards like the Dunkin' Donuts acetate cards, and it's like, who would have ever thought like a Dunkin' Donuts collab all these years later would be so sought after where people's eyes light up when they go to a card show instantly and they see one of those. But and it seems like with that and just my recollection that in the getting into like the EX 2001, just the EX set, that's where acetate really started to at least get into my purview. But was it before that though, or is that really sort of when we started to see those big parallels in earnest for that substrate?
I mean, we didn't really use acetate or plastic that much in the early 90s. We printed on wood. We tried a lot of things, but we did not really use the plastic. So I think once we started doing that, Earl and I really enjoyed to design those sets. So I think we did a lot of acetate cards at that point. I think That's Jam, that card, to me, that made perfect sense because I wanted it to look like the jar. And then we put white in the middle so that it looked like the label. And sometimes, certain things made more sense. For the Dunkin' Go Nuts, I mean, I think that could have been on another substrate. It doesn't have to be on the acetate, but we wanted those two colors of the foil, that green and that orange that are so like recognizable.
Yeah.
We did them in a holographic color. So it wasn't a flat color. It was kind of like the PMGs. We had a custom holographic colors made. And we just felt like we wanted that to be what you saw. So the plastic kind of makes everything else go away, and all you see are those colors in that. Yeah. So, working on all these different substrates is what I think I love the most. I think it makes the cards look even more elevated than we try to simulate some stuff on C2S. But once you start playing with stocks and oh God, there was Rave Reviews was on like a gold stock that I had found. Yeah. I love that stock. Apparently it's pretty sensitive and chips on the edges. So I have, that wasn't a great thing, but I just loved it. And I didn't think we could achieve that by trying to do it with foil and embossing. And we can simulate some things, but some things you just only can get by using something different. And there's a few sets coming up now that we designed on some stocks that I've found recently, and I'm anxious to see what people have to say about those.
Cool. I love hearing about new stuff. So you said that you designed with Fleer through roughly 2000, 2001. Is that what you, and then you took a hiatus, right? From the, pretty long one from the sports card world. When did you go back to it, and what brought you back to designing trading cards again?
It wasn't intentional. Like when I left, I thought, I'll design for some other companies too, and we kept our design company, Earl and I, but we had 2 kids, and that became my priority. And I wanted to stay in trading cards, but a lot of the trading card companies that we contacted were like, well, we work in-house, or we have other designers already. Everything's okay, And at that point, our stuff was popular, but nothing like later on. So when it became like the mid 2000s, and like I was saying, I did that interview with SB Nation, that kind of set it off. That was in 2018. I did another podcast with Cardboard Chronicles, and a lot of people saw that and kind of started contacting me after that. And Mike Phillips, who is the VP of sales at Upper Deck now, we worked together at Fleer in the 90s. So he contacted me. He had seen one of those interviews, and he said, we would love to have you come down and speak at the CDD conference. So I don't know if you've ever been to one of those, but
I haven't, no.
Okay. It's like a diamond dealer conference that they have. So it was in Florida, and I was like, yeah, that would be fun. So I went down because they own all the Fleer brands. They owned all the brands that I had worked on, and those cards had become so popular that they thought the audience would be interested in hearing some about that. And so that was in January of 2020, right before COVID hit. So I did that, went home, and literally everything shut down for 2 years. But at that time they said, why don't you guys design a set for us? So we designed, they said, we want to come out with Metal Universe Champions.
Okay.
As like a set that would go with Goodwin.
Yeah.
And so we designed that first set. And then
what was that like? Because it had been 23 years or more since was it kind of weird to be in that headspace again?
It was weird, but it was like riding a bike. Like literally as soon as we started working on it, we had so many ideas for the next set and the next set. So it was fun. I mean, I was like, oh, I missed this. So then they said, how about we sign a contract and then you'll do like a monthly kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you'll work on different sets. So we started doing that. And that's how we got back into it. So that was in probably 2021 was when we started working again for them.
What do you remember as like the biggest changes in just the sports card industry between when you left in 2000 and came back in 2021? Was
in
it
the industry or in working in
working in the, maybe, I don't know, however I guess you want to, that question hits you. I'm just curious because when you work in an industry and then you take a 20-year break and then you come back, it has to be almost, some things are probably felt like you said, riding a bike, and then other things were like probably pretty foreign, I would assume.
Well, one thing that was surprising to me was how much direction the designer would get, which I alluded to before.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt a little bit handcuffed, and I would go to, I would say, well, I have different ideas than this. Like, what if we do this or that? And to Upper Deck's credit, like they were right away, they were saying, okay, yeah, that sounds great. So we started working back and forth rather than me just taking the direction and just going with it. We had a lot of say in that first set, changed some stuff up. And also I was not aware in that time that I was away that so many retro sets were being done. So I had no idea that they were still doing Jambalaya and they were doing some PMG stuff. And so
I think, Gene, for hockey, the 2012 Fleer Retro set is the big connector between the designs that you did, because most of them I think are your designs in that set, if not all of them. But it was those designs with a new crop of modern heroes and superstars.
Yeah.
Right. So you could get the Sidney Crosby in the Jambalaya for the first time, or the Wayne Gretzky. Well, it was 2008, but to me, it's like that. It's almost like a greatest hits CD, that 2012
right.
Clear Retro set, and was a big bridge.
I didn't know that was going on when
Really?
I had no idea. So then once people started contacting me, they would say, what do you think about these retro sets? And I'm like, what retro sets? So then I started really looking at the industry again and getting back into it. And I was flattered. Like, I was like, I mean, it's amazing that they were putting out the sets, but I was like, oh, I wish I had like some input into some of it. So now I get ultimate input into a lot of the cards, which is great. And, I'm glad a lot of the hockey players were able to see those cards, because some of that stuff most of it happened after we no longer had a license at Fleer for hockey. So, brings me back to EX2000, which we're now working on. They announced it at CDD.
Yeah.
That EX2000 was going to be a set that we were going to put out. That's a set that back when we did it, oh God, when was that? 96, 97. We did baseball, football, and basketball. And we had the hockey ready to go. We were practically on press with it. We had created all the cards. We had all the films. Everything was ready to go. And that's when we were no longer going to be doing hockey. So they said, we're pulling that project. So literally, it's the project that never was, the card set that never was. So Mike Phillips and I worked on that together at Fleer. And so he now works at Upper Deck, and he said, we do hockey. This is crazy. This is the set that never happened. Why don't we do this set? And so he has been pushing for this for a while, and now it's finally coming about. I'm excited about it. It's taken a lot. This is one of those sets that technology has changed. It's not as easy to do that set. It was a difficult set to create even back then, and now even more so. But I think it's going to be.
Well, what makes it so unique from a printing technology perspective?
Well, there's a card on the front that's die cut around all the all the player pieces, and then you have to then flip that and die cut the back so that when they go together, you don't even see them. The die cuts have to match up. And dies are like steel wool dies. They're literally handmade. So the front has to match the back, which is and it's reversed. And then in between those two pieces is sandwiched a piece of very thin acetate. And they both have to, all that stuff has to line up. And the two have to come together and they have to line up. And I mean, there's just a lot of pieces that have to fall into place for that to come about. So the die cutting is the hardest part. I mean, that's an art, and they wanted to laser cut them. Laser cutting is so long. Laser cutting each sheet would be impossible as far as like how long it would take, and also very expensive. So that's what we, some of the problems that we've been coming up with is die cutting, but we've somehow worked it out, and I think it's going to be a really amazing set. So I'm anxious to see it, and then I can complete my set. I have the other 3 sets. I'm hoping to get a full set of that.
I feel like that there's some parallels between Synergy and EX.
For sure. Yeah.
Now, was Synergy already a set before you came back to Upper Deck, or is that something that you
No, Synergy was a set. I haven't worked on Synergy yet, but I will. And I've seen it. So like the EX 2000 had that border, and then we worked to get the border taken away. So it's kind of more like the second year of EX, not really the EX 2000, which has this, border around it.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, to me, that's very much like EX.
One question I have, and again, you can go to Arena Design, has its own website. You have a lot of cards on your Instagram, but you've done work in multiple industries, a lot of packaging work, and not that that's not important, of course, because there's a lot of like subliminal, whether it's toilet paper or whatever it is, right? I mean, that has a big role in marketing. But with that stuff, though, you don't get almost the inherent pressure of when you or designers that you work with at Upper Deck, that how scrutinized these cards get. And I'm just wondering, like, how you guys, do you try not to think about that, and just, or does that enter? Is it unavoidable?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we try to think about that, but we put out so many sets, and there's so many inserts even within one set and parallels within one set, that we can take risks with certain cards in that set and just have fun. But also it's an immediate media. So I know it seems like it takes forever for us to get, for any card set to get out. You want it immediately as soon as you know it's going to come out. But like those sets I would see within a year, right? And then they'd be gone, and I would probably already have, by the time I saw Metal Universe Champions, I had already designed 2 more.
Yeah.
So 2 more years of those. So like you don't really have time to know what worked in that first set that you can, play off of. So you're always kind of assuming that things went okay, or people are going to like it, or whereas with packaging, that's going to be on the shelf that could be on the shelf 20 years from now, that same exact package.
True.
So you have to think way more longevity. You have to, it has to be more classic. It's Whereas with cards, you could take a lot of risk because you're on to the next
The
one.
pace is so heavy that you
Yes,
almost even don't have time to worry too much because there's something new around the corner. And
right.
um, even if something doesn't work, I suppose you got a new opportunity in front of you to correct it or kind of have it meet the vision, your original vision, or something like that. I
Yep.
would assume.
Yeah.
Okay, so of the sets now you're working on at Upper Deck, what's the most challenging one from a creative perspective?
From a creative. Oh, well, I think metal is probably the
Really?
most creative. I mean, yeah, because the original set has such like people really think of metal as that set. And I'm always wanting to make it different,
Yeah.
but still keep to the heritage of it. So as the years go on and the more we do that set, the harder that will be.
Mhm.
I feel like it's going to need to change more drastically from the original. As of now, like we're kind of playing off of those ideas of universe, and even that first set that we did played off of the universe images that we got from the
Yep.
Hubble, like that. Um, so that's going to be a challenge. What do we do? I don't want it to look the same every year. So,
Well, it's kind of
but,
like the golden handcuffs, is that it works so
yeah,
well
right.
that you almost can't depart. But if you don't depart from the formula, it'll get old and repetitive
Yeah.
too fast. And I it surprises me that you said that, but as you explained it, it does make sense to me that you would think that way. Because in a lot of ways, like Metal Universe really is a giant sandbox to try new stuff, and because it's
Yeah.
very insert driven set,
Yeah.
and it's not like the cup where everything has to have that kind of minimalist museum, very kind of traditional and fancy sort of vibe to it. You
Yeah. Which I
can
love
do,
too.
yeah.
Yeah.
um
And also, with metal, there's you know, the way that I think of metal, or some of the sets, it's not only metal, but there have been sets where people are like, well, this is what PMGs are, or this is what metal is. And their idea of what metal is different than mine. Like when metal first, I look at metal as a set that is driven by every card being kind of unique and has
yeah.
its own look. And it's not like, Ultra or these other sets that I worked on where every card looked the same. It was a different player. I wanted every card to look unique and have a different look. So I feel like that's the history of that card. And it could change and it could be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be a universe feel to it, even though it's called Metal Universe. Sometimes it was metal driven, really. I mean, we did that a few years
Yeah.
where, so stuff like that. And it's funny because I'm like, okay, sometimes you do something, you put it out there, and people have their own idea of what that card was. But to me, that's the history of it, and not necessarily the etched foil universe feel.
Hmm.
I think it should be like a unique card. So,
Well, I agree. I like the idea of trying new stuff because you got to like break a lot of eggs, right, to find something that works. And
right.
the it's like what the Jambalaya of tomorrow, right? People may not be flocking to it today, but if we rely too much on what's worked in the past, I think there's a place for tributes and retros, right? It is kind of neat,
Yeah.
maybe once or twice, to see a Connor McDavid in one of the most revered or iconic card types.
Hmm.
But and this is just my opinion. This is not your opinion. It's when you start to see it over and over, year after year. But then I understand too, like that's where the economic come into too, and this is a product, and the product, the Upper Deck is a business, and they want to make money, and they know what sells, and so I imagine it's a kind of a constant tug of war between what's going to satisfy the customer versus what's going to move forward. I sometimes think too, like, I'm sure as a designer, like you've, studied like the whole Apple approach to design and product development, where Steve Jobs would take away the home button, even though everyone loved it,
Yeah.
and was like, no, 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 don't take it away. But he was like, no, I have to.
Yeah.
I need to look forward,
Yeah.
and it'll be okay. And 2
And
years
it
from now,
was.
and it
It
was.
was okay. Yeah. I mean, I am definitely more of that philosophy. I understand, wanting to know ahead of time if somebody's going to like something.
Sure.
But if you give them, if you ate cake every day, you would hate cake, no matter how much you love cake now. So to me, it's like, yeah. And some of that, you don't want to devalue the ones that are already out there either. So you see something over and over again, and the value starts to affect other cards previously. So I think we're of the same mindset at Upper Deck that, there is a place for all of that, but that, we're trying to do new things. That's why they brought me in. I'm really doing a lot of R&D, and looking forward and trying to get some interesting stuff into products in the future. So
That's music to my ears. I'm very happy to hear that. Have you ever gone to work on a set and had complete creative block, where you're like, and you couldn't even do like, I just, we're almost like akin to like writer's block or something like that?
I always have that fear. Like I used to tell Earl, I think that was the last stuff that I'm going to have an idea for. Like literally, I don't think I could come up with another thing. But no, somehow it just happens. And I would get out of the office a lot, and Flea was very good about that. And Upper Deck, being here now and having some time away from the office is when you recharge and you come up with things that you wouldn't if you were just sitting in an office all day. So,
Well, yeah, inspiration. If you're in the same environment day after day, you
yeah,
don't have any new inputs coming at you that you can draw inspiration from.
yeah.
So,
And I have a big team there that I want to inspire. So if I find something cool, I'll bring it in, and that's the first thing I want to do is show the designers there, like, hey, look at this. This is really cool. Like, think about what we could do with this. Or I show the product development team and see what they think. And, they have different ideas than what I initially thought of it for, so it's very much a team collaborative work environment, which I love. I think the best ideas that we've had in the past, even the stuff that people love of mine, came from a team effort, like working with the product development team. And like we were saying, the right card, the right person on that card, the right technology, the right seating ratios, all that stuff play into how the card.
how many photo options do you guys get when you're? Because I know there's photo coordinators, and I know that
Yeah.
Upper Deck works with freelance photographers to source photography, but that's a huge part of
It is.
the card design. And do you guys get like a lot of options to try to find the perfect photo to fit the design of the card, or do you almost have to design the cards around the photos?
The design is done first, and then between the design and product development, the photo editor is given direction.
Okay.
And so the first time I see that is when I see the grids, which is seeing all the cards. I send over one design, then they make it into, or any designer sends over their one design and they make it into the full set. And then you start looking at it. I just looked at a set and I had to pull a few photos because it, like, maybe the name of the set should tell you what the photo should be. Like if it's like a energetic name, then it should have more of an energetic photo. If it's
Gotcha.
So some of that stuff, we leave it to the photo editor, but sometimes we can reject photos. Sometimes we're limited on photos for certain people, especially rookies that haven't played that much yet. So, like we try to be flexible. There's a lot of things that play into it.
Do you like designing portrait cards around like portraits of players, or do you like in action
I like action.
photography?
I like more
Me
action
too.
photography. Yeah.
I understand the constraints. Like a lot of times the rookies have that constraint because that's
Yeah.
really all they have is from like the draft or whatever it is, the portrait. But not
No,
that they're
it
portraits.
depends. I have a couple of ideas right now that are specifically for portrait cards. So I'm looking forward to working on those. But generally, I would say, yeah, action. I like.
Gotcha.
And hockey is like, that's what I love about working on hockey cards. The photos I think are beautiful because they're skating on the ice, and the ice like literally lights them up. Whereas
Oh, I haven't thought of
basketball
that.
is dark and football is outside. You don't know what you're going to get. Baseball, whereas the hockey, it literally are the most beautiful photos to me. And then their uniforms you see much more of the color. Football you do, but I think just the hockey photos are really just nice to work with for design.
Yeah. Well, and what is also super unique about hockey is I think probably biased, of course, because I love hockey cards. But when it comes to memorabilia, the
Mm-hmm.
best patches that exist of any, you have the Blackhawks, which is a big deal right now with Connor Bedard. But you can
Yeah.
have, I think somebody said like up to 7 colors in a patch there, and just the most
Oh, right.
intricate, most beautiful patches. To me, I would think that one of because those cards like the patch auto card is so popular that that's when you get into that 2.5 by 3-inch canvas to
Yeah.
sometimes try to fit everything on there and primarily where the photo of the player isn't sacrificed to a large degree that can be a particular challenge.
Well, also because you have the goalies, which take up so much
Yeah.
space. So a lot of times I'll design a card and all the players will look great, and then the goalie will get in there, and I'm like, we're not seeing any of that background, but and that's the nature of that. So I just have to sacrifice the background on the goalie cards, or if it's a strictly goalie card, then we can design around that.
Gotcha. One of the design considerations, did you it's coming out in a couple weeks. Did you work on OPG Platinum?
No, but I have opened a box of that.
Okay. One of the things that that at least from the images that we've seen that I was impressed by, which it's kind of to me has been a big challenge with the chromium cards, is that the autos, like I actually prefer non-autoed cards in OPG Platinum because
Okay.
usually to get the autograph, I'm assuming to stick that they had to. I don't know what the term is, so maybe you can tell me where they kind of um like deaden the surface a little bit or white it out
Yeah.
so that the because literally that chromium surface, a marker would never stick to it. You could just like wipe it right off
Right.
real easy. And that to me that had always taken away from the
I know.
design so much of the card, because the whole point of it is to have that chromium shine and kind of brilliance of it. But it seems like that this year that you guys as a team anyways were really smart about maybe lowering the auto, not putting it like right in the middle, and so whatever sort of that fading effect, it looks more like that they're almost fading the photo of the player.
You're
and
right.
uh and I just thought that I've always thought that that's got to be, like that's where maybe the technology that is in a particular set, when you have to consider, well, not just the base cards or parallels, but how popular autos are and how necessary they are to get collectors interested. And then going back to memorabilia too, that it's kind of a puzzle to figure all those things out together.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working to try to get even like assignable UV or something that allows the card to stay glossy. right now, we have to kind of vignette it out to a signable area. All that stuff is taken into consideration. I mean, even on the back where there has to be a block for the numbering. Some people don't even like that small block that's behind the number, if it's a sequential numbered card. So we're always trying to work to how do we eliminate some of that, make it less noticeable.
Oh, like that little, like almost looks like a tape strip. I've asked Billy Cilio about that. He said that that's because your printer, the new printer you guys use. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, we knock out a block out of the UV so that because when we foil number or we number the back of the card, it can't attach. It won't attach if it's got the UV. So we have to knock out a block out of the UV.
Oh, that makes sense.
So we're always, we're trying to eliminate even little stuff like that. It seems like nothing. It's small, but you don't want your eye to be detracted to that, So we're always trying to make everything better, whatever we could do.
Well, I don't want to take up like way too much of your time, and it's been, hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have, and I've always wanted to talk with, well, not just to use had such an accomplished run as a card designer, but just to understand like what the kind of perspective and considerations are for designers. And so super grateful and appreciative of your time, and can't wait to see some of the stuff that you guys come out with in the near future.
I appreciate you having me on, and I think you asked some interesting questions, which is great, because a lot of times you just you talk about the same thing, so it's nice to delve into the process, which is what I love doing anyway. So
all right, Gene, we'll talk to you again soon, and thanks again.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.
All right, we're back. Many thanks to Jean McLeod again. Would love to have her on the show in the future. It's kind of cool, Troy, that maybe we don't give Upper Deck enough credit for being as open as they are. We've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people there now and really get a great understanding of kind of how that side of the hobby works, and maybe it's that we don't pay enough attention to the other sports, but I don't see a lot of shows or YouTube videos that have interviews with guys from like Topps and Panini that go into the depth and detail that the folks at Upper Deck do.
Yeah, that's one thing I've really appreciated, is that they don't really shy away from tough questions. You just saw in the Jean interview, she talks about some stuff. I was really interested just from her perspective and her story, hearing about everything. And like you said, we haven't really talked to a designer. We always talk to the product managers usually, and to hear the design process, and even stepping away from being away from it for a long time and then coming back. It was an awesome conversation. I'm really glad we got the chance to talk to her. I'd love to have her back again on the show. But yeah, we really appreciate people like her coming on and opening up and talking about what they do.
All right. Well, that is basically our show. Just a couple of news and notes. Of course, we have the Troy. Every time you say Troy solo experience, I think the Jimi Hendrix experience. So maybe you have to like put some like blacklight posters in your office. Or
well, I'll talk
like
to if we do that. I'll get the blacklight posters. I'll talk to Mitch Grotman. I'll get him to get a pick card, and he'll get his guitar, and he'll get the pick card. And what were those called again?
That.
Those picks,
metal picks.
Metal picks. I'll get him to play guitar again, and we'll just go back and forth of him playing guitar.
Then beyond your solo show, the next week is going to be a pretty big week, of course, for the Gong Show. We're working on some exciting plans for the release of Series 2, the Connor Bedard Young Guns. The hobby's head will explode. Everyone will go crazy. We'll all be completely euphoric and happy and broke at the same time. So looking forward to that. But that's our show. If you like the episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you listen to us on. And if you love the show, you want to show some support for Troy in his solo experience coming up on Thursday, want to chat with us every day on the Hockey Cards Gongshow Discord server, please consider a $5 a month donation. Join our $1.99 support level tier on Patreon. Link is in the show description on both podcast apps and in YouTube within our Instagram profile. our TikTok profile, or go to our website. We do have a website, hockeycardsgongshow.com, and there's a become a patron link there. Or if you want, just go directly to Patreon, patreon.com, and search for Hockey Cards Gong Show. We are on social media. Follow the Gong Show on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. And Troy, the Hockey Cards Gong Show podcast is a production of Dollar Box Ventures LLC. Go Skippers, and hopefully I stay out of jail.